Good morning, everyone. The webinar will begin in just a few minutes. While waiting, I do encourage you to download the handout that is available under the Handouts tab on the control panel. And while we wait for the webinar to begin, we do have Christine Zust on the line. Christine, with the nature of training drastically changing recently, what are you seeing as some of the challenges that facilitators are facing in developing and delivering virtual training? I also welcome you that those of you that are on the line to send me any comments you might have about virtual training through the chat function on the control panel. So Christine, what have you seen recently as far as delivering and developing online virtual training?
Well, Patrick, what I've experienced, and I've also had multiple conversations with my fellow trainers and facilitators, I'd say first and most important is to make sure that the participants know how to use the platform tools. There are a lot of great platforms out there. Today, we're using GoTo as our platform. There's also Zoom and WebEx and some others that people can take advantage of. And each platform has its own tools, both for the trainer and facilitator, and then also for the participants. And I know that sometimes when the pandemic started and everyone was running around thinking, what do I do? What do we do? You know, we did invest a good amount of time on the front end of a lot of our training programs to make sure that people knew how to use the platform. And I would like to think that by now people know how to use the platform, but as I was taught in journalism school, never assume anything. That makes sure that people know how to use those tools. And with that, I would say, and one of the things we're going to be talking about today is how we can take advantage of this virtual platform for our participants.
Yeah.
And I would say the other is adapting activities. That's a huge challenge for many trainers and facilitators. We've had our go-to activities for years for our in-person training, the activities that we know and love, and they're so wonderful and great. And some of them translate into the virtual training environment, and some of them just don't. And so I think that's been a frustration for some trainers that they haven't been able to adapt, or they find themselves scrambling to try to find really good activities for online. And we will be talking about that today as well.
Yeah, as far as learning about the platforms, one thing we've done, as you know, Christine, here at the Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development, we put together a document that goes out to all of our participants prior to the training that shows some of the features that are going to be used in Zoom. And then we also offer with some of our clients, our contract training clients, to meet with them ahead of time just to go over some of the features and things that are going to be used in Zoom. So
yeah, Kent State has done a great job.
Well, thank you. And our facilitators have done a great job adapting.
Thank you.
Oop. Got a little out of control there. So we are right at time. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Engaging Adult Learners in Virtual Training. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm Program Manager for Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development's Public Open Enrollment Programs. Our center specializes in providing employee development for partnering organizations in Northeast Ohio and around the world. We offer training as both public open enrollment programs currently being delivered live and virtually via Zoom, and also customized program that can be delivered live and virtually or at your location. Since we want to continue to deliver these informational webinars for you and practice social distancing, we are delivering this webinar remotely. So your facilitator, Christine Zust, will be presenting from her office and me from mine. And I am joined today by Kent State facilitator, Christine Zust. I'll be serving as a host, and Christine will be our presenter for today. Christine has more than 25 years in communication and marketing management in the private and public sectors. She specializes in strategic communication, planning and positioning consultation, and also provides corporate facilitation and professional development programs. She works with executives, emerging leaders, and management teams to develop credibility and clout with key clients and stakeholders externally, as well as to develop more productive leaders and teams internally. Christine's unique facilitation skills in strategic planning and brainstorming sessions help clients to develop a clearer vision of their potential. Her articles on leadership are regularly featured online, and she received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Public Relations from Kent State University and also a Master of Arts degree in Interpersonal Communication from Bowling Green State University. She's also the author of the book, Everything I Do Positions Me, The Simple Path to Professional Success. For Kent State, she facilitates programs such as delivering powerful presentations, enhancing your professional presence, and Each One Teach One, engaging employees in experiential learning that is part of Kent State's Certificate of Training and Development. Everyone in attendance today has been muted to avoid background noise from any of the over 100 participants. We do encourage you to ask questions at any point during the hour. You can submit your questions in writing using the control panel on the right side of your screen. I will present your questions to Christine as time permits throughout the webinar. There's also a handout available to you that summarizes today's presentation. It is located under the Handouts tab on the control panel. We encourage you to download it and take notes during today's presentation. We are recording today's webinar, and you will receive an email next week with a link to the recording after we conclude our time together. Before we begin, we'd like to ask you, the participants, in which environment do you feel more comfortable as a trainer or facilitator? I will launch that poll now and give you a little bit of time to answer that, and then I will show the results. Okay, just a few more seconds here because it looks like just about everybody has voted. Okay, so it looks like 42% are saying that they're more comfortable in person, 39% says there's no difference between the two, and 18% says virtual. So that's not surprising to me.
Not surprising to me either.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we saw the results, I would like to introduce Christine Zust.
Good morning, everybody. Well, we are still in this environment. We all know how our lives have changed, and they're going to continue to change in the coming months, and I'm sure somewhere in the next year. What has happened, of course, is we have fond memories of the things that we could do in our lives and in the workplace, and now how different our lives are today. With that said, this mind shift, not only continuing in our lives, it also shifts in our training. Next. We remember the good old days, and like the poll just indicated, we do love to be in front of people, feeding off of each other, bonding, feeling that energy. And the challenge to us, of course, is to take that same kind of energy that we put into our in-person training and make it come alive as facilitators, trainers, presenters, because that mind shift forces us to be creative, to make people still feel connected as they did when they were in the room. They're still in the room with us. They're in a virtual room instead. So the greatest advantage, I believe, in virtual training is that what virtual training allows us to do is we can expand our time outside our virtual program. Now we can do that for in-person training as well. But today, in today's agenda, I have 3 areas that I'm going to focus on today that help you be a little more creative when you are training and facilitating your programs. And we'll be looking at these 3 areas. First, I'll concentrate on some tools that you can use. The second is reminding us of the kinds of strategies that we need to put into place to keep adult learners engaged. And last, I have just a few thoughts and ideas on how to find and adapt activities for the virtual environment. Let's get started with the first of these, effective training tools. And I have 5 examples that I'm going to share with you. And they're examples within examples, if you can believe that. So the first is advance work. Now, as you know, advance work is anything that can be done ahead of the training program. And it can be something that you can have people do a week ahead of time, several weeks ahead of time. It's up to you. But here I've got 4 examples for you. The first is to ask them to read something, an article, a case study, a book. I've just used an example of one of Susan David's topics, emotional agility. Now, there are big books out there and little books, and there are big articles and little articles, and there are fun things and there are scholarly articles. It just depends on the depth of knowledge that you want to share. So the second, of course, is asking your participants to take an assessment of some kind. And that can be anything from some of the personal inventories that we know, Myers-Briggs DISC, or there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other assessments that you can find online or that you can create yourself on topics like leadership, management style, communication style, listening. The third, of course, is asking them to interview someone. There's real power that comes from interviews. And because we're living in this virtual environment, it's so easy to pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone. Whatever your topic is, you can have the list of questions or you can keep it more open-ended just on the topic. The choice is yours. And the fourth and last one in this category, of course, is asking them to watch something ahead of time. It could be a movie clip, a video clip, something that you found on YouTube. It can be a serious topic, or it can be lighthearted and whimsical. I'm a huge fan of Pixar. If any of you like animated films, Pixar trailers, or I should say Pixar shorts, usually appear on the front end of any of the Pixar animateds that we've loved for years and years. And they can take any topic, whether it's communication, leadership, customer service, listening, whatever the topic is. I guarantee you a Pixar animated short will do a beautiful job. So the second, of course, of these tools that are available to us as facilitators and trainers are post-training assignments. And as you know, this is something that we put on the tail end of our program that allows people to continue the learning. If it's a one-shot deal, if we're just doing one training program on that topic, or if it's a multi-day, post-training can either be at the end of that one-day event or as a bridge between day 1 and day 2, for instance. And I've got 4 examples to share with you here. The first is to read an article, ask them to read an article that takes that subject to a much deeper level. And the example I've presented here, the teams at work fighting racism in the workplace. That's a very serious topic. It's something that is definitely in the forefront of serious topics nationally right now, impacting workplaces and communities and our country. And let's say if you were doing a multi-day training program on the topic of diversity. So diversity, let's say day 1 would be a foundations class, understanding what diversity is, how it works in your workplace, what the culture is at your company. So it's a foundational course the first day. Part 2, day 2 of that, could be a deeper dive into this topic. So what this white paper could do is it serves as a bridge between that foundations course that you've provided, that day 1, and a more serious depth to the discussion in day 2. So the second example I have for you under post-training assignments is giving your participants a very specific set of questions to answer, either after the program has ended or before the next program begins. And something that is so tailor-made for their work that would apply to them in their workplace. The third is to ask them to complete a research project. Now, this is a very broad concept, and research can be anything that you want it to be. It can be small, medium, or large. It just depends on your topic and what specific assignments you have for your participants. And the last is ask them to take a follow-up quiz. Now, we know in training that we always like to test the knowledge of the participants after we have shared information with them and we have allowed the participants to share information as well with each other in the room. And what a follow-up quiz does, it allows us as the trainer and facilitator to see what have they learned, what did they remember. Now, we all know that the more time that passes, the more that adults forget. And you can time this follow-up quiz to happen anytime. It could be immediately following the training. It could be 2 weeks after, a month after. Again, you have to decide how it fits into your training schedule. The third tool that I'm outlining for you today is teamwork. We have that wonderful ability to assign teams to work between training programs or after the program has ended. And really, it's up to us to decide how we want those teams to work. So 3 quick examples I have for you here. One is finding some in-depth case studies that would require some role playing. Now, I've got Harvard Business Review here in parentheses, but you can do a Google search and ask for the best business schools in the country or in the world. Every business school, well, I'm making the assumption that it's every business school, but I'm going to be bold today. Every business school has outstanding case studies. And think about some of the business schools that we all know across the country. The Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern. We've got one here in Cleveland, Case Western Reserve's Weatherhead School of Management. Wharton in Pennsylvania, MIT out in Massachusetts, Stanford. We've even got a business school at Kent State University. How awesome is that? I had a colleague of mine a few years ago that designed a training program on buy-in, and he used a wonderful case study, and I'll share that case study with you. You can certainly see if you can find it. Most of these, I might add, you have to purchase. It's a great way for business schools to to bring cash into their schools. But this one came out of Kellogg, and it is called, I should say, a Newport Girl Doll Company. I'll say that again, a Newport Girl Doll Company. Guess what kind of company it was? It was a doll manufacturing company. And within this case study, there were 5 roles that the team would divide. So you had to have teams of 5. Vice President of Finance, Vice President of Licensing, Vice President of Marketing, Vice President of Public Relations, and Vice President of Sales. Even if people didn't possess these titles in real life, assuming these roles really gave them a feel for what it took to really look at this particular case study, what the challenges were with a Newport Girl Doll Company. And I have to say, it really opened my eyes to the wonderful resources that are available to us as trainers and facilitators, where we really want to deepen that knowledge, really expand people's minds in the business environment, and case studies is a very powerful way to do that. The second example I share here again is research projects, because when you get people working on a research project together, they learn how teamwork works. So it's just a great way to bring that team together. And the third example I'll share with you is observation. We don't use observation enough in our training programs. I remember when I was in graduate school and I took my first qualitative research class. It was a class on ethnography, and ethnography is in essence being a fly on the wall, going into a community and sitting and watching and observing. Now, with social distancing, of course, it presents some challenges to us. However, we can still observe people in action on news programs, on the television, on television shows. There are other ways that we can still observe until our quote unquote normalcy returns to us. So those are the examples for teamwork. And the fourth tool that I'll share with you is one of my personal favorites on some of the other platforms that we use, the Zoom platform, for instance. That's breakout rooms. Honestly, hands down, this is the best way to engage participants in a virtual environment. Now, you have to create some ground rules, of course, when you're working with colleagues, because I don't need to see Sam chewing his sandwich on screen. I don't need to see that. I don't want to see that. And those ground rules are really up to us to create. But it's a bonus for you as the trainer, because it means it's less work for you and greater benefit to the participants. It's a win-win situation. Think about that again. Less work for you, more work for them, and more beneficial work for them. And I'll tell you why. Because based on the feedback that we have received in our evaluations at Kent State University, the positive feedback that we receive, we loved the breakout rooms. Please, can we have some more? It's a wonderful way for people to see each other virtually and to communicate. And honestly, I have seen it happen in my Each One Teach One training program this past fall. We had a very small group and the bonding was incredible. And I would send them off on their merry way with some assignments and allow them to be in their breakout room for anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. It just depended on the assignment that I had for them. And quite honestly, I was so impressed with the level of bonding that happened because I allowed that to happen in my training room. And the last thing I want to say, and I'll reiterate it again, is on our evaluation sheets at Kent State, people have said time and time again, we needed more time in the breakout rooms. We needed more time. When you make those assignments, don't just do quick, short 5-minute, 10-minute things. If you really want the learning to sink in, if you want people to have a really good time getting to know each other and hashing out the content together, sharing their personal experiences, give them the time that you believe they need. And I'll tell you, they will love it. And of course, we know this is available, WebEx, Zoom, GoTo. Most platforms out there have the option of providing the breakout rooms. And the last tool I wanted to share with you today is, of course, technology, tech assignments. We get ourselves in this mindset that when we're in this room together, that we have to stay here on this platform in real time only. And I'm here to say you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can incorporate other tech tools, and I've got 3 examples for you. The first is having people talk with each other by phone. We all have cell phones. Now, it presents a challenge if someone has phoned into a session, but if everyone is using their computer, they still have their phone within reach. What a concept. Okay, take the next 5 minutes or the next 10 minutes to have a conversation with your assigned partner. You have each other's phone numbers, have a conversation. It's a totally different concept. You have to be really tight with that time limit, and you have to set a timer on the screen so that they know when their 5 or 10 minutes or however long you want them to chat with each other is up. And the other, of course, is we have within our chat panels, you can have private chat as well. You can assign partners to chat with each other in the chat panel. The second, of course, is to interview others by phone in real time while we're here together. We all break away, we go off in our own directions with our phones, and we eventually work our way back to our computer. The third, of course, is to perform quick research tasks on the web. These can just be simple 5-minute, a couple minute assignments that get them doing something different than just being here in this room on this computer with you. Like, for instance, you can give them a topic like leadership, customer service, or you can be very specific. Okay, Google the word mind mapping tools and let's see what you come up with. It's just a fun, creative way to get people to do something other than just sitting here with us. If you mix it up and make it a little bit different, more fun and exciting, believe me, they will love it, and so will you. We've reviewed the 5 tools with examples that I had for you today since we're on limited time. And there are things that you can use to engage your participants in online learning. And before we discuss our second topic, here's another poll question for you that Patrick's going to launch. In the future of the training that you deliver, what percentage do you expect is going to be delivered virtually?
Just a few more seconds because it looks like almost everybody has voted.
Okay.
So if you look, about 50% vote at 50% of training, followed by 38% of greater than 50%, and 12% at less than 25.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that number because I do believe that we've made so many changes this past year that moving forward, I don't know if we're going to be on target with those numbers or if we will spend more time with virtual. It's anybody's guess. Thanks for participating. The second topic that I wanted to discuss today is just a reminder that we are dealing with adults here. And as you know, adult learners learn in three primary ways: visually, which is seeing something to get it. Auditory is hearing it in order to understand it. And the last is kinesthetic. They want to do something or experience something in order for them to learn it. So of these three areas, we're going to start with the visual learner first. As we know, a visual learner is someone who has to see something. And I have 9 examples here of different strategies that we can use to keep the visual learner engaged. The first is graphics. We know that anything that someone can see, any kind of picture, helps them to retain information. The second is illustrations. If we can illustrate it for them in a certain way, it's meaningful to them. The third is images, and that can be photographic. I'm a much bigger fan of photographs than I am clip art. The next is demonstrations. Now, when you give demonstrations in this virtual environment, you'll have to practice it several times because you really need to be far away from your computer camera in order for them to see whatever it is that you're trying to demonstrate. You might create a demonstration video to show them instead. The next is mind mapping, which I've already mentioned. I'm a huge fan of mind mapping. It's one of the greatest tools that we have as trainers and facilitators to capture ideas and information. And if you want more information on the topic of mind mapping, Google it and you'll find a lot of great stuff out there. Tony Bazan is the creator of mind mapping, and his last name is B as in boy, U, Z as in zebra, A, N as in Nancy. And that's my cat Gidget in the background. And if you can hear her meowing, I apologize. The next is visualization. I love to use visualization in my training programs because it allows people to get outside their heads and get outside their comfort zone a little bit to try to challenge themselves. The next is video and movie clips. I talked about this earlier. It's a wonderful way to keep the learner engaged. Next, of course, is PowerPoint. Love it or hate it. It's the primary tool that we as trainers and facilitators use. And there are a lot of great design capabilities within PowerPoint that we can take advantage of. And the last, of course, is our handouts. A handout is still a visual tool for us to use. It's something that someone can see, and it's a great reminder to them of what they have learned. So now that we've talked about the visual learner, let's move on to the auditory learner. And as you know, these are people who hear the spoken word. They don't need a lot of visuals to fill in the blanks for them. And so here are some strategies, some examples, and I have 7 examples for you here. Lectures. Now, for those of us who had to sit in boring classrooms in our life and listen to lectures with no visuals, we're not the auditory learner. We're the visual learners. But for the auditory learner, they love lectures and love that spoken word. Any kind of discussion. When I talked about any activity where people are discussing things as a group in your classroom or as assigned pairs, people who are auditory learners love those discussions. The third, interviews. Again, it's just a great way for the auditory learner to learn something about another person or a topic. The next one, those paired conversations, a little more intimate environment for the auditory learner, but a great way for them to share and learn. The next is storytelling. But think about it, we've all been told stories from the time we were small. And as adults, adults love storytelling and anecdotes. What I've found in my programs is people not only love the stories, they love anecdotal material that I bring from my life and my experiences. The next is audio clips. Yeah, audio clips. The auditory learner doesn't have to see it to get it. They just simply have to hear it. And the last is music. Now, in my training room in person, I always start my programs with music, always play music on the breaks, over the lunch hour, afternoon breaks, at the end of the day, if I'm doing a full day program. We can do the same thing in the virtual environment and know and understand that a little bit of music goes a long way in the virtual environment. You don't have to play it as long or as frequently as you do in stand-up training. And the third type of learner is the kinesthetic learner. Now we know and understand that these are the individuals who they like to touch things, feel, experience, manipulate, play with things. So it's very different. We have to think about it in a little bit different way in the virtual environment. So I have 6 examples for you here. The first is written assignments. Why? Because kinesthetic learners have to create their reality by writing it out. And so if we have written assignments for them, it could be a journal. We might ask them to keep a journal on a topic. If it's a multi-day training, that's a cool idea. Or any other kind of an assignment. Write a letter to someone. Write a letter to your boss. They love those kinds of things. The second is taking notes. Now, I will tell you that in the in-person training, kinesthetics are the ones that you want to watch for and wait for because they are the voracious note takers. They're the ones who take the longest to take their notes. Now, when I'm in person, I can gauge that by seeing them in front of me. Well, I don't have that same luxury in the virtual environment, which means that I have to time myself and guess and hope, fingers crossed, that I'm not going too fast. But I will tell you a lot of platforms like WebEx and Zoom and some others, they have a speed it up or slow it down icon where we can keep our eye on that if we're going too fast. The third is asking them to examine objects. Now this is where it gets challenging because we don't have them in the room with us. But what if I gave you an assignment right now for you to examine an object that's right in front of you right now? What if I asked you to find an object on your desk that you use every day? Or find an object on your desk that helps you communicate more clearly with your coworkers? I can give you that kind of an assignment to have you look at something. Or I could ask you to bring something into a program to give you that information in advance. And we'll be talking about that. The next is getting them to participate in activities. The kinesthetic learner loves experiences. They love feeling things. And so our challenge is to make sure that they get what they need by giving them that opportunity to participate. The next is interviews. And honestly, I believe the real reason why kinesthetic learners love interviews is because they get to take notes. And the last is movement. This is one that we think more of when we're in our stand-up training environment, getting people moving around the room, doing a gallery walk, walking over to a flip chart, walking around the room and reviewing everything that we've written on Post-it notes. Yet we forget that we can also do that in the virtual environment in a slightly different way. If I wanted to, I could ask you right now, and this is just an example because I don't want to lose you, but I could ask you right now, get up and walk around your office for the next 2 minutes, or go outside and take a breath of fresh air, come back in. So I can assign movement activities to you if I want to, something that keeps you moving in my program. The key in learning about learners is to mix it up so that all types of learners, the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, they're getting what they need from your program. Because if I design my program just from my perspective and I'm only thinking about that one learner, the way I learn, like what if I were an auditory learner? Oh my goodness. I'd really have to stretch outside myself. So mix it up in your planning and design and facilitation of your training programs. Now that we've discussed how to give adult learners what they need in order to learn, let's explore our last topic. Activities. I mentioned earlier that one of our greatest challenges as trainers and facilitators is finding or adapting activities for the virtual learning environment. I did a search, and these were the exact words that I used: best team building activities for online training. As you know, when you use Google as a search engine, you can ask the same question 10 different ways and you get 10 different answers. And this is what came up. And by the way, Mind Tools, if you haven't tapped into their knowledge and expertise, they have just some amazing materials online. And look what came up: virtual team building exercises. Wow, what a concept, because I typed in the right words. And the next example I have for you, because communication is my background, my wheelhouse, I just did best communication activities for online training. And I got 49 exercises, games, activities, just by asking a question. There is so much good information, and some is better than others. Obviously, you have to really dig deep to find the really good stuff. It is out there. And I wanted to share with you one other item. You can ask whatever questions you want. And one of my favorite activities in person, and I have translated this exercise, this assignment, activity, whatever we want to call it, into the virtual environment. Let me give you the background on this. In communication, I tell my participants that we have to be mindful of the kinds of questions that we ask ourselves when we're preparing ourselves for, let's say, a meeting or presentation. We also have to anticipate the kinds of questions that people might ask of us if we are the expert in the room. I learned the inverted pyramid when I was a public relations major at Kent State University in the School of Journalism. I'm sure many of you know the inverted pyramid, you have used it. It was really designed for reporters, journalists, as they were going out in the field to cover news stories, to make sure that these 6 questions were answered in their feature article: who, what, when, where, why, and how. I use this in my presentation skills program as a way for people to prepare themselves to anticipate questions from their audience. But I also give people an activity, and I frame it in one of 2 ways. And what I do is I divide my group, depending on how many participants are in the room. Either I have 6 groups because there are 6 questions, if it's a large enough group of participants, or if it's a smaller group of participants, I'll divide this into 3 groups with 2 questions each. And my assignment to them is simply I'll give you 2 minutes to create who questions or what questions, which means that question has to start with who, what, when, where, why, or how. And the example that I give them is looking at a project that the CEO comes to you to do. And so in that case, if you want to know more information from the CEO, you're going to go through the inverted pyramid and create questions to ask the CEO about that project. On the other hand, if you come up with a project that you want to initiate and you want to take it to the CEO, then you use the inverted pyramid, anticipating the kinds of questions that the CEO might ask of you. Now, when I do this in person, it's easy because everyone's in the room with me and I just count off, give people a set limited time. They come back together, they share their examples of the kinds of questions they created. In the virtual environment, what I've done, I do it a couple of ways. I can use this in a breakout room. I have done that. I've also asked the group at large to use the chat panel. And we go through each of these questions. Give me some who questions. And then they'll type them in the chat panel. And that way we all see it, we review it. When I do it in the breakout rooms, then each group reports out separately. And it works. This is one of the success stories of examples that have worked. And as I said at the beginning of our program today, you will find that there are some tried and true activities that just don't translate. And that's okay. If you can't use them in the virtual environment, I know you can create something else that is just as effective and just as fun. Before I wrap up with some final thoughts, I want to turn to you and see what questions you have of me. And that was a whirlwind presentation. I'm sure that you have some questions to ask.
Yes. One question that came in, can you explain role playing? Because that term can have a lot of different meanings across different industries.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's important for you to know in your industry or at your company or organization what that phrase means, and make sure that everyone is clear on how it is defined. Make sure that that definition is shared. Role playing, from my perspective, what it means is it allows us as adults, adult learners, to slip into someone else's position for a brief period of time and to pretend as if we are that person. And like I said, on the Newport Doll Company example, they had very specific roles that were being played within that team. which meant that when the team comes together to work on solving this case together, they are no longer, Susie from the customer service department. I'm Susie, the vice president of marketing. That's what true role playing is about. And we have to remind ourselves that we are playing that role in that exercise. And let me share a little secret with you. I do this in person. I don't know how you could do it in the virtual environment. We could think about that for a moment. But when I do any kind of role playing in my in-person programs, I have small finger puppets that I bought at IKEA. I have about 40 of them that are in a little magic bag in my closet, my training closet. And I have people put these little finger puppets on their finger puppets when they're role playing. Why do I do that? Because I know when you're sitting across from someone who you work with, and when you are just being yourself, even though you're pretending to be Susie, the VP of marketing, you're still presenting yourself as yourself physically. What the finger puppets do is there's no way you can get personally attached or offended by a finger puppet. And they're magic. I don't know how to translate that into the virtual environment. The only way you could do it would be if you mail finger puppets out to your participants in advance. I know that's crazy, but that's my long definition of role playing. I hope that that helps you understand what it is and also gives you some creative ideas.
Next question, can you give us a couple examples of breakout room activities that you've used?
Well, I gave you one already, which was the inverted pyramid. And of course, I don't have any of my training materials in front of me except for this webinar. Talk about putting me on the spot. I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh, I have some really good ones. I'm just drawing a blank on what they are. But I will tell you that when I have people break out in groups, it's a very specific activity that I want them to do. Let's use listening, for instance. That's a good one because I do have a good listening exercise. Within listening, I always divide the groups as a triad. So you have two speakers and an observer. And then they switch roles. They rotate the roles so that you have an opportunity to experience what it feels like to be a speaker and what it feels like to be an observer. And they're following the model that I use in my communication training for active listening. And so it's a very specific assignment on how to use that model in the time that they have. So that's one example that I can give you of how to use the breakout rooms. The other would be powerful questions. And I wanted to mention this earlier, so I'll mention it to you now. Out of Case Western Reserve University is the Appreciative Inquiry certification program. I'm a certified AI practitioner. There's a wonderful book called The Encyclopedia of Positive Questions. Write that down. Encyclopedia of Positive Questions. It has 4 authors. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I will tell you that this book provides questions on 40 different topics. 40 different topics. Here's one. How fun. Men and women working together. Wow, what's that like? Strength in diversity. Integrity in action. Inspirational leadership. These are some of the topics. And then they have questions that go with this. I have found that in the breakout groups, giving people a specific set of questions to tackle or interview themselves. A breakout room can also be with just two people, partners as well. And I mean, you can do a lot of really fun, creative things. Just remember, like I said earlier, make sure you're giving them enough time.
Okay, good. Next question. Excuse me. How do you feel about webcams, and should they be mandatory during training?
Oh boy. Well, like I said earlier, not if Sam is eating his sandwich. I don't want to see Sam. That's really a personal choice. I don't have a problem with webcams. I believe that it's a great way that people can get to see each other, to still create that connection, especially in the breakout rooms. You definitely want to see who you're talking to. But that word mandatory is tough. I always like to keep things optional. However, sometimes when things are optional and half the group is participating using a webcam and the other half isn't, it creates a disconnect. I would say create some ground rules for yourself, like Patrick said earlier, to make sure that there are no distractions where possible. Because just like me, I had my cat meowing a few minutes ago. I'm embarrassed, but I can't mute myself because she's in the background. There are some funny things that can happen when you're on webcam. And yet again, webcams can be distracting because if you have people who look like they're not engaged and you see it, and then you start to wonder, are other people seeing that? Gosh, I mean, I'm sorry that I'm rambling in answering to you, but I see the benefits of webcam. I have no issues with it as long as you create solid ground rules that help you stay targeted and focused.
Okay, good. I think we have time for one more question, and it is, if someone is not okay, or if someone is not engaged, is it okay to call on them?
Well, this word engaged can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. We're living in a very different world right now. What engaged means today and what it meant 2 years ago is very different. People's lives are changed forever through this coronavirus. People are stressed out. I think people are getting tired of being, some people, extroverts are tired of being in a virtual environment. And so when we say if they're not engaged, we have to cut people a little bit of slack because we don't know the struggles that people are going through. And there are a lot of struggling people out there who are just barely making it to our programs, and we don't know what's going on in their worlds. So if I think somebody's not engaged, I can call them out if I want to, but during this time of the pandemic, I don't even want to go there because I don't know what that person's going through. All I can do, and I say this in my in-person classes as well, all I can do as a trainer and facilitator is do my best job, bring my best self to the training room and deliver my best materials so that you, the participants, feel comfortable. And you know what? If you have to snooze through part of it, and you're in my program and you're snoozing because your colicky baby was up at 3 a.m., I'm not going to call you out. Or if you had to visit your parent through a glass window at a nursing home and you're living a stress life, I'm not going to call you out. I think we need to redefine what engaging means, and all we can do is bring our absolute best, and we can ask it of our participants, but that's where we have to draw the line.
Okay, good. Well, that is all time we have for questions. Christine, do you have any final thoughts?
I do. Now that we've spent this wonderful hour together, hopefully you can feel my energy and my passion as a trainer and facilitator and human being. Just take this question home with you of what you can do more of to design your virtual training to be more effective for the learner. Because all too often we focus so much on what we want to happen. And ask yourselves, am I giving the learners what they need? Now, today we've covered tools. You have some tools to use. You have the knowledge of the adult learner's needs. And you also have a vast selection of online resources and activities to engage your participants. And I know you all have people around you who support the wonderful, fabulous work that you do. So I want to say thank you so much for being with us today, being with Kent State University as we continue to serve you and your companies with our creative programs.
Great. Thanks, Christine. So that does conclude our time together. We would like to thank you for attending and encourage you to register now for our upcoming programs in the Certificate of Training and Development. You can see the dates and times on your screen. The Each One Teach One, Engaging Employees in Experiential Learning, is coming up in March, and that is Christine's program. And then we also have the second part of the High Impact Learning, Fundamentals for Designing the Adult Learning Experience, and that'll be in April. Both of those programs will be delivered live and virtually through Zoom. And you can register at the website on your screen. All of our spring 2021 programs will be delivered live and virtually through Zoom, and all are open for registration right now, again, at the website on your screen. To learn more about these programs and all of our other programs, I encourage you to contact us at 330-672-3416 or at yourtrainingpartner@kent.edu. You can join our extensive list of clients and bring Kent State to your organization. We can tailor all of our programs to fit your needs. We also encourage you to register for our next webinar, which is coming up on February 19th. With Kent State facilitator Deb Easton, where we will be discussing how to ask effective and influential questions, and we'll be discussing topics such as the review of the different types of questions and how to use them, discuss how to avoid questions that backfire. You'll learn to ask questions that elicit responses from non-responsive people, and also discover new questions to use in the midst of a perplexing dilemma. Registration for that webinar will be opening soon. So on behalf of Kent State and Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development and our facilitator, Christine Zust, thank you again for attending today and have a great weekend.